So let's actually immediately pivot, as with the start of this, the recording, go from the Torah portion and come back to revisit what we were just discussing. This Torah portion is the first Torah portion, the first foray into the book of Numbers, right? The book of Numbers, the which is, as I point out often, and it's not going to be different this go around. A lot of times, I see that's the beauty of a cycle of Torah portions. It means that a certain idea that, even though we discussed it last year, is worth revisiting because the idea is a fundamental one, and it's something that we have to revisit. Like a lot of things, like anything that you are engaged in life, there's going to be repetitions, right? It's not like every second should be something brand new and you never do something again ever. Rather, life is cyclical, so that you come back to these important principles or important ideas or important practices or whatever it is, right? If you're training, you're going to be doing a lot of the same things, et cetera, et cetera. But the goal of the is that each time you do it at a little bit of a better or a little bit deeper, a little bit more efficient, whatever it is. So that's not just a circle, it's not just a wheel, it's a spiral, right? So the fact that a certain principle is something we discussed last year, that's okay. It's the same in Torah portions, in that it is the same idea, but hopefully we can probe it deeper. We can find more to talk about it, talk on it. So a point that I mentioned in years past, and mentioned it again, that it seems to be that the name reflects the content of the Torah portion, of this Torah portion, in as much as they're both boring. Now, what do I mean by that? Even just the names, like even as a kid, I found it puzzling. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, right? So first of all these things that sound wonderfully Greek, right? With like, not common parlance. These are uniquely named things, right? Then Deuteronomy, which forget that it's unique and special. I don't think anybody can spell it on their first shot, right? Spell it correctly, right? There's a T in there, there's a E and a U, and which one comes first, and whatever it is. And so four of the five books have these appropriately strange biblical kind of unique words. And then the fourth one is called Numbers. Numbers, right? It's like, which one is not like the rest of them, right? Again, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, right? How did this one fall in? And Numbers, right? Unless you're, again, an accountant, or at the age that I discovered this, into Sesame Street and the count, whatever it is, don't find a particular joy in numbers. Numbers are not exciting. Numbers are very vital. They're very important, but it's hard to be inspired by numbers. And so it's like, if you saw a book called Genesis, you'd be compelled. It's a compelling title. You'd pull that book off the shelf. Deuteronomy, you'd wonder what does that word even mean? So you'd pull that book off the shelf. Numbers is not going to be a book that inspires you, again, unless you're a CPA, right? You're not going to be inspired to yank the book. Numbers, oh my gosh, this sounds like it's an inspiring work. Let me pull this book off the shelf. And when you start this parsha, it seems to fit that name. What does this parsha do? It's a census, right? This tribe has this many people, right? This of the age of between 20 and 60. The next tribe has this many people between the age of 20 and 60. Blah, blah, blah. And this tribe. Oh, by the way, did we mention the tribe of Shimon? Let's mention tribe of Shimon. There's Issachar. Oh, and Zvulun and Dan, and each of the tribes and their numbers and whatever it is. There's a reason why when you get a knock on the door and they say, and here's who it is, and they say they're here from the U.S. Census, you don't expect to be opening the door to some great professor or some great, whatever it is. Because this is seemingly not something that holds, while again, it's vital and important, it's not something that carries any depth to it. It's just count one, two, three. Okay, let's get done. Or in Judaism, not one, not two, not three, right? Or whatever version of not counting that we do. So the this parsha seems to set up, or the name seems to set up, and then the parsha seems to validate that this is going to be a very technical, logistical, perhaps necessary, but boring part of the Torah. Nothing could be further from the truth. First of all, so much of the drama that is the story of the Jewish people going through the desert is going to happen in this book of the Torah. The book of Leviticus we got pretty cerebral. We were very much focused on service in the temple and how it was done, whatever it is. And now we're getting kind of back to the storyline in the book of Bamidbar. Not the opening parsha and a half, but then we're going to get after Bamidbar Naso. Then we're going to get to Balos. There are stories in Balos, but then the famous stories, the iconic stories. Shlach is the whole story of the spies. Korach, the story of the Korach rebellion. Chukas. There's so much packed into Parshat Chukas. It's like when we get there, it's like there's so much to talk about. Balak is the story of the king of the Balak, the king of Moab, hiring Bilam to curse the Jewish people. So much of the drama of the Jewish people in the 40 years in the desert occurs in this book. So if we're following the kind of the thematic timeline that we have established, the book of Genesis was giving us the individual iconic figures that in a sense imbue Judaism and indeed humanity with a sense of personality, right? A deep dive into Adam and Chava, a deep dive into Noach, a deep dive into Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, and to learn, we're able to compare, contrast qualities, good, negative, etc., etc. How to be a mensch, right? And what does a mensch look like? And how does a mensch deal with these kind of things, etc., etc. Shemot, we zoomed out, right? We zoomed out and we talked about God finding his nation. But for the most part, the book of Shemot is less about what the nation did and more about what God did for the nation. He took them out with all the plagues and et cetera, et cetera. So while it was focused not on the Abramowitz family, but focused on the nation that was descended from the Abramowitz family, it was more God's part in this show. Then we went to Vayikra. Once God has taken the Jewish people and made them a nation, this is what daily service to God looks like. So what else is left to discuss? What is the book of Bamidbar? The book of Bamidbar is the Jewish people actually getting down to business. Actually, and what it is, for the most part, when we're talking about all the dramatic moments, the mistakes, et cetera, we have to give the Jewish people far more credit than most people give. Most people look at the generation of the desert, again, and most of the stories associated with that generation of the desert are going to be in this book of Bamidbar. Other than the golden calf and the splitting of the sea and the stories that happened kind of at the very beginning of the Jews at the sea and then at Mount Sinai, most of the stories of their 40-year journey through the desert is not in the book of Shemot and not in the book of Vayikra. It's here in the book of Bamidbar. And you can, if you go through all these stories, as I said, the stories of the spies, the stories of the Korach rebellion, the story of Bilam, and then the stories of them facing off with the various kings and the wars that they waged on as they were approaching the land of Israel, the land of Canaan. You would not be faulted for walking away with a relatively negative opinion of the Jewish people, of that generation, the generation of the desert. Why? Because they seem to be complaining a whole lot and testing God's patience a whole lot. Indeed, God himself said, right? Vayinasu osi ze eser pa'amim, that these people have tested me 10 times. Right? First, we don't have any food. God sends the manna. We don't like the manna. It's not this. So he sends the quail. We don't have too much quail. We want to go back to Egypt. We don't want to go back to Egypt. We want to go into the land of Israel. We don't want to go into the land of Israel. Fine. So you're going to stay in the desert. We don't want to stay in the desert. We want to go into the land of Israel. Right? Moshe, where are you? Moshe, we can't be here without you. Moshe, we can't. We create a golden calf because we can't even be a second without you. Now we're rebelling against Moshe because Moshe, you're not a good leader. We want somebody else as a leader. We can't make up our minds, seemingly. We're constantly complaining, yada, 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 right? And so people could think this is one nudgy, malcontent generation.
You're frozen.
Unfrozen?
Yes.
Yes. How much of my little soliloquy did we miss?
The first this.
No, so I was saying, so ultimately, you can look at this generation and just watch it as a series of constant complaining and constant nudging, right? Right? As I said, they want the man, they want the man. Then they say, we want food. Man comes from heaven, not food. So we want to go into the land of Israel, right? We want to go into the land of Israel. Okay, we're going to the land of Israel. Let's send spies. No, we don't want to go into the land of Israel. Fine, you're not going to the land of Israel. You can spend 40 years in the desert. No, now we want to go into the land of Israel. Moshe, we need you as a leader. If you're not even going to think about being a leader, then we will golden calf, right? Then it says, but then all of a sudden, Korach, we don't want Moshe as a leader. We want somebody else as a leader. People seem to be constantly complaining. And here's two things to consider. This generation is called the Dor Dea. The generation of incredible insight and knowledge. We actually consider them one of the greatest generations that ever existed of the Jewish people. Don't forget, these were the people that were willing to walk into a desert without anything. They were willing to walk into a sea. These were the ones that stood at the foot of Mount Sinai, and the anniversary of this day, of this moment is coming up, saying Na'aseh v'nishma. What about all the complaining? Well, realistically, they complained 10 times over 40 years. That's a pretty good record, if you ask me. My kids complain 10 times over 40 minutes in a car ride. And I would actually say if it's only 10 times in 40 minutes, then we did pretty good, right? So all things considered, we have to keep in mind. Now, the Torah does not shy away from highlighting it because it's always a learning moment, a teachable moment. So the Torah shares because there's something to learn. But the most important point, go ahead, Paula.
So why should anyone be surprised? Why should Hashem be surprised? Of course, he can't be surprised, but how many times did God test Abraham?
10.
We're just following the example.
That's right. God never says, there's never the expression, I'm surprised. To a certain degree, you're 100% right. God isn't surprised. There is consequence, and God shares and reports on it because we have to learn that whether surprised or not, there is mistakes carry consequences. We learn from the consequences. That's the point of having consequences. When you do something and your body gives you pain, that's a good thing. Numbness is dangerous. Numbness is you'll do something damaging to the body, you won't feel the pain, and so you're likely to do it again, and it's ultimately very not good. Pain is your body telling you, rumble strips on the highway, you're veering off course. You're doing something that is damaging. So it's not so much that God is surprised, and ultimately it is wrong-headed. Nowhere does the Torah say that this was a bad generation. It does say that at the time of, for example, with the spies, God says that this is a generation that does not have what it takes to go into the land, and so they will not.
So I was thinking about the Meraglim and the whole Sefer, and it seems to me, look, my Talmud knowledge is tiny, 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 but the two events for which Israel is made responsible for many bad things that happen seem to be Chet HaEgel and the Meraglim. not Korach. Korach doesn't do us well either, but these two events seem to be the seminal. Do you agree with that?
In a way, the difference is the reason why Korach not, for example, is because there was only a very small group of people that were actually involved in this. And we're actually going to talk about this as we get on Shabbos. Preface, be there for Shabbos. It's actually
I
going to be a
will, I
pretty
will, I
good
will, I will. Please,
Devar Torah
God.
because I learned a very beautiful talk of the Rebbe that was something I haven't learned yet. So fresh new material arriving on Shabbos. Um, uh, 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 something I'm excited to explore. Um, but uh, but the point is um, that Korach's rebellion did not encompass all the people like the Meraglim did and like the Cheta Egel did. So that there is the quantitative aspect of it. Also, qualitatively, it was less of an issue. When the Chet Egel, we can imagine why it had such a qualitative impact. It was a
Mm.
terrible, terrible. You're standing on the foot of Mount Sinai, you're creating an idol. And it's hard not to see why that ultimately. It's actually why we're probably on the side of Moshe, who's surprised that with 1/2 shekel coin, right, they somehow managed to atone for something as severe as the Egel, right? But number two, and the Meraglib is your entire point of going through on this journey is to arrive at the land of Israel, and now you're rejecting going into the land of Israel. That's also a massive thing, right?
Okay,
So,
good.
but be that as it may, it turns out that all these things, even the story of the Meraglim, we end up giving more credit to them than I think, unfortunately, history. Uh, uh, and a scholarly by a I mean like a historical and a scholarly read of history that a layman's read of this story does not grant them the same um, um, courtesy that actually the scholars of the Torah do grant them, and for the very basic reason as follows: yes, they made a series of mistakes, but we have to keep in mind that when you delve into it, and we will be doing this over the book of Bamidbar as we study this together, fall prey to nearly the same type of mistakes to this very day. And we have the benefit of 3,000 years of experience, and we still fall prey to these mistakes. This was the first generation that had to blaze the original trail. And what do I mean blaze the trail? Blaze the trail of what? Blaze the trail of being God's earthly people. People on earth in this material world with a divine connection and divine mandate to somehow straddle the physical and the spiritual, the material and the divine is not an easy thing. It's an incredibly thin tightrope, right? Gesher Tzar Ma'od, right? It's a very narrow bridge. And what each one of these stories is them erring a little too much to this side of this, a little too much to this side. It's like trying to ride a two-wheel bicycle for the first time and sliding to the right and sliding to the left. The Torah says we have to learn from their mistakes because we have to learn from their mistakes. But it doesn't mean that this is an indictment. We are not here to indict an entire generation. We call them the Dordea for a reason. Again, they were an incredibly insightful generation, and they had obviously the greatest Torah teacher. So they did phenomenally well for a generation that had to navigate this incredibly nuanced, nearly impossibly nuanced position for the very first time as a nation. But this leads us to Bamidbar. Numbers, because we don't get into any of these stories. We don't introduce the people until we introduce the people. And this is the key thing. The book of Bamidbar opens up with the census. Why? Why is the census so important? How do we know it's important? Because the entire book is named after this. Wait a minute. In Hebrew, we don't call it numbers, right? We call it Bamidbar. But we do call it numbers because all these names that the secular names, I don't know, secular, whatever the origin of these names are from the subtitle names of the Talmud. The Talmud gives each one of these books a subtitle name. Like the book of Vayikra is also called Torah Kohanim, Leviticus. This book is called Sefer HaPikudim, the book of Numbers.
Excellent.
So that is where the whoever it is that gave this, I'm not even sure the origins of it. It's being interesting to figure out how the Pentateuch received its who gave the original titles. But in this, they were taking the byline name of the Talmud. So this is called Sefer HaPikudim, which means even though this story has so many dramatic lessons to be learned about the Jewish people in the desert, which is again why we call it Bamidbar, we choose to call it Sefer Pikudim. That also becomes the way that it is referred to in the world. Why is the census such an important aspect? Not only is it an important aspect, it becomes thematically the description of this entire book, because the answer is a census is, in this case, and what it means in Judaism, and not just to have a general sense of the numbers, it's a very important point. Very important point. Another indication that the census is very important is who did the census. Who executed the census that is being mandated here in the beginning of the book of Bamidbar? God tells Moshe to gather who?
Levine.
Himself, Aharon, Elazar, and the heads of every tribe. And we name them. The Ruvain, Elitzur ben Shteyor, the Shimon, Shlumiel ben Surishadai, etc., etc. All the names of all the heads of the tribes. And this was the cohort. In other words, the cream of the crop, the all-stars, the most important figures of all the Jewish people were literally walking door to door and knocking on the door and asking who, how many, who, what. They didn't have anything better to do. They couldn't have sent a schnook to go knock on the doors. They themselves had to go and personally knock. Can you imagine you're sitting there in your house, bing bong, census, and you open up the door, and there is the President of the United States and the Secretary of State. How many people? Who's in your house? Oh, hey, Governor of Maryland. Why don't you take down the? It's like,
oh my God, what a scene.
Yeah. The problem is, for us, we might hold the actual minimum wage census worker in higher esteem than we hold the president and the governor of Maryland. But be that as it may, we can imagine that if Moshe and Aaron and Elazar and the head of your particular tribe are the ones who are knocking on your door, this clearly is an indication that as far as God's concerned, this is the best use of the most important individuals in the among the Jewish people's time. It's a remarkable thing. Why? It seems to be that our society has the right of it. You don't need the greatest among a society to be just literally taking the count. So why is it, in fact, that the whole book is named after this process, that the greatest among the Jewish people were the ones executing on this process? And it is because of what we were talking about right before we started the recording of this class. Because there's an incredible lesson in the ethics and morals of humanity to be learned from the great feat that God achieved in taking one human being, one Adam, and minting all the rest of humanity from this one person, and every single one is unique and different, right? And it's not just. The Talmud would seem to be implying that this is just another thing to praise God for his greatness, right? That anybody else, if you're taking one form and you're minting a whole bunch of things from this one form, they would come out all identically. How great and how praiseworthy is God that he's able to take one form, mint all the rest of humanity from this one form, and each one comes differently. That's not the main point the Talmud is trying to make. Because again, this is couched in the conversation about morality and ethics, about how we have to look at our fellow human being. And the understanding is, although we do come from one being, and it would have been easier, as it were, to have it, would have been more, let's call it natural, that every single one of us should come out as a carbon copy. God deliberately engaged in an act of infinite supernaturalness to break that mold, no pun intended, to have actually each individual come out unique and different. Why? So that you understand that you are not the exact same like somebody else. You are intrinsic and intrinsically valuable. There is no other you. There is no other you. And to a certain degree, you are as unique, even surrounded by billions of other human beings, as Adam was unique when he stood as the singular human being on the planet. You, with all your faults and all your foibles and all your fallibilities, and I don't know why all of those start with the letter F, but you are unique and necessary and needed. Stand up and be counted. And there's no more important thing that can be done than for Moses to say, I see you. I see you. You're number 157. But there is no other 157. You're number 157. And if you wouldn't be here, we wouldn't have number 157. You are unique. You are you. I, Moshe, come and seek you out. You don't have the right. What will oftentimes be an act of the Yetzer Hara, one of the Yetzer Hara's most devious, nefarious, and successful strategies, to have you devalue your own worth and say, why is it that I'm not doing this? There's great work that could be done, great work that needs to be done in this moment, but I'm not the one to do it. Who am I? Who am I? What am I? What do you mean? Moshe came around to see you specifically. Hashem minted a one-of-a-kind coin when he minted you. And that is the premise of the entire book of Bamidbar. Interestingly enough, even as we zoomed out, and it's no longer about the individuals of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and telling their individual story, and we've zoomed out now, and it's an entire nation. No, it is still about the individuals. It is a nation of individuals. It is a species of individuals. Like no other species. No other species was created as an individual. This species starts and continues to be individuals. And that is important. Because ultimately, that removes from you the excuse as to why is it important for me to step up? Why is it important for me to look at the Torah? I'm looking and it says, it's asking a lot. Okay, I'm going to bow out. I'm going to remain on the sidelines. I'll let the capable ones play the role. Now, I think in this group, and hopefully in most of the people you'll bump into society, we're not talking about people that are so radically obsequious that they're always on the sideline. I'm not talking about that. We're not talking about that this is the antidote to those that are career sideliners. but in that we always know, I think we can all know of the moment, the crossroads, where the moment comes calling, and in what we think is an act of humbleness and humility, we say, let somebody better do it. Let somebody let God, why don't you send somebody who can get the job done better? Who did I just paraphrase? So you just so that you know you're in good company when you do this. I just paraphrased Moses himself at the burning bush. Right? The first thing he
Absolutely.
said is Shlach nabiyat
Absolutely.
tishlach.
Right, right, right.
Send the one that you're gonna send. To which God tells Moses, I
Guess
am,
what?
and it's
Guess
you.
what? Surprise.
But it can't be me. I'm not capable, right? I can't speak well. Da, 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 and, yeah. And God tells Moshe, me some pel adam. If I'm asking you to do it, I'm going to give you the ability to do it. Who else said these words? Esther, when it was her moment to have her rendezvous with destiny, right? She says, "I'm not the person. The king hasn't asked for me in 30 days, and yada yada yada. Let's find another way to save the Jewish people." And what does Mordechai say?
If not
Im
you.
hachareish tacharishi ka'et hazot. This is your moment.
And then,
So it's not like that you that you wouldn't be in good company when we all say this, and we think again we're being humble, right? But ish Moshe anav ma'od, right? Moshe was the most humble of all people, and God says this is misplaced humility. In fact, this is arrogance, because arrogance, and I've shared this, the current head of the ADL, whether you like him or not, voluntarily took the position. He didn't have to, and really didn't want to. How do I know this? Because he made the decision at our Shabbos table.
hmm,
Jonathan Greenblatt was at that point a advisor to the executive branch in the Obama administration on Jewish affairs, whatever it is. It wasn't, wasn't necessarily a household name. It wasn't, but he was one of those that he was a liaison to the Jewish, whatever it was. And at a certain point, decided he's retiring from that position, and he's going to move to the next stage of his life. Uh, while he was in Washington, his kids were in our Hebrew school, and then in our summer camps, we got to know him pretty well. And as his tenure at the White House was coming to an end, he was at our Shabbos table. Unbeknownst to Nachami and I, was that at this point, him and his wife were discussing. They were at the crossroads of their lives in terms of career, things it's going to take, because their plan was to move back to New York, where both of them were from originally. They wanted to move back. They were in Washington again for the role in the administration, but they were both from New York, and that's where the family was. So they're planning on moving back to New York. And I was talking on this point at the Shabbos table. It wasn't this week's Torah portion, maybe it even was, but the point was that as I framed it, meekness is arrogance and humility is strength. Meekness is arrogance and humility is strength. Because meekness, by the way, when the Christians translate a quote from Scripture, from Jewish Scripture, and they say the meek shall inherit the earth, that is a mistranslation and a dangerous mistranslation, a very un-Jewish translation. Their principle is that you be meek. If you walk around, and then God will come in and he'll give you the oomph, and hopefully the meek will have their day, right? By the way, we don't see that the Christians really believe this, because the last time I checked, when the Christians were in power, they didn't act all meek and self-effacing, kind of threw their weight around pretty heavily, right? But that's a different conversation. But Judaism, the quote in Hebrew or in Lashon Kodesh is Anavim Yirshu Aretz. The humble shall inherit the earth, and humbleness and meekness are polar opposites. As I said, Meekness is arrogance, and humbleness is strength. How is meekness arrogance? Because when the moment comes calling, the moment that you are needed for whatever it is, a big thing like taking the Jews out of Egypt or something small or whatever it is, the meek person says, I can't, I'm uncomfortable. I don't, what does every sentence begin with?
I,
Me.
I.
I.
The moment needs you, and you're focused on you. And if you're up to it, and if you can, etc., etc. Humbleness is the opposite. It's not about me. And if the moment comes calling, the answer is Hineni. Right? When the moment comes for Abraham, Hineni. Right? Moshe, Vayomer, Hineni. Here I am. I don't sit there and think, can I, can't I, that. Here I am. And there's an incredible strength in that. Because at that point, you will be able to do things you never thought you were able to do. Because you're trusting that if this moment comes calling to you, that God has given you the wherewithal to do it, and you will be able to achieve things beyond your expectations, beyond your wildest expectations. So humbleness is actually strength, and that was Moshe. He had to learn it. God had to wag the finger at him a bit. But we see this in Moshe. We see this in Abraham. They did unbelievable things, changed the face of all of history. But it all started with a certain amount of humbleness and faith. As I was saying, so I was saying this, and Jonathan Greenblatt's wife Marjan starts to cry at their Shabbos table. And I'm looking, I'm like, okay, I don't usually move people to tears with my words. I'm not that good. So I'm looking, and she looks at her husband and says, Jonathan, I think we have our answer. And I'm looking puzzled. And he says, I believe we do. And he says to me, he says, Rabbi, I can't tell you right now, but what you've just said is exactly what we needed to hear. And I promise you that when the time comes, I'll let you know. So the Friday before the official announcement, Jonathan calls me up and he says, Rabbi, do you remember the Shabbos table? You said something. My wife became emotional. So I'm like, yeah, I remember it. I don't often make people cry at my Shabbos table. So yeah, that I do remember that event. It says, well, the reason was because at that point we were deciding whether I go into and I moved back to New York. I was offered by a few friends to join a hedge fund, make boatloads of money, have a 9 to 5, come home. You know, my name, nobody will know my name, nobody will, whatever it is, and I won't have to I'll live a quiet, private, comfortable life. And that was where I was heading. And then I got a phone call from the board of directors at the ADL saying that that Abram Foxman is retiring and they're looking for a new CEO. And my name came up. And so they want me to consider the position. And I came back and I told Marjan, and I said, really, my inclination is not to take it because, I already did my public service in the administration. I want to now just kind of be a private citizen. I don't know if I can take it, big shoes to fill, et cetera, et cetera. But Marjan says, maybe we have to consider that if God is sending this your way, it's something you need to do. So we were going back and forth on a bit, back and forth. What's better for the kids? What's better for the family? What's easier for us? Et cetera, et cetera. Then we sit at your Shabbos table and you say, when God comes calling, the answer has to be Hineni. Mm-hmm. So I just want to tell you, Rabbi, that I said Hineni. Ultimately, now here's the thing, and I want to say something. I don't agree with a lot of the decisions made. This video is going to end up on YouTube. So, Jonathan, if you end up watching this, I think you know that there are things that because I've mentioned this to directly, but you cannot be faulted no matter what specific decisions you made and whatever it is. But the decision that when God came calling, you said Hineni will always be a feather in your cap. And that's Parshas Bamidbar. Stand up and be counted. You are one. One of one, as it were. An intrinsic number. And without you, we don't have that one. And we need that one. It's often repeated, the little famous line from the Rebbe, right? Adapted from what he said, but the point is that your birthday is the day that God looked at the world and said, this world cannot go a day longer without you in it. So ultimately, the census and the number taking, the idea that we're all minted from Adam, but each and every one of us a unique individual, is not just about how to show respect for somebody else, that they are also unique and therefore deserving of your basic courtesy and respect and decency, etc., etc. But it also is, how do you view yourself? And if you understand that you are a unique, intrinsic creation of God, then there are going to be times where no, this cannot be done by anybody else. This could be done and needs to be done by you. When you say, Shlach na b'yad tishlach, God, send the one that you were going to send. God says, I am. And that's you. I'll finish with a beautiful story of the Rebbe, a beautiful letter of the Rebbe. Beautiful. One of the pioneers of Chabad rabbis ever sent out was a rabbi that was a Chabad rabbi that the Rebbe sent to New Haven, Connecticut, which doesn't seem far away from New York, but very, very different than Brooklyn. Let's put it that way. Especially back, this was a person growing up ensconced in the Hasidic community, being by the Rebbe's Farbrengens, etc., living that life so close to the spiritual light source. And the Rebbe sends him off to New Haven. You can imagine that when he arrived in New Haven with his hat and his beard and his long black coat, he stuck out. And he got down to business, and he did what he was sent to do, to bring Judaism, and it was a huge, heavy burden and responsibility. He's the only one. First, it's breaking all the stigmas. It's bringing a orthodox brand of Judaism to a place that was very, very proudly reform and conservative, and but dealt with the obstacles, dealt with the responsibilities, etc., but it started to take a toll, and he was feeling very lonely, and from lonely sliding into depression. And so he writes to the Rebbe. He writes to the Rebbe and says, Rebbe, I'm finding myself at a low spiritual ebb. It's hard. I'm lonely. I'm lonely, and I feel tapped out. So the Rebbe responds to him. This is, by the way, the name of this rabbi was Rabbi Moshe Yitzchak Hecht. Really an icon, a pioneer in every sense of the word. Created, in a sense, blazed the trail that so many Chabad rabbis follow and emulate. So the Rebbe writes back to Rabbi Moshe Yitzchak Hecht. He says to him, I'm sorry to hear about the difficulties and the challenges, etc., you're going through. And it is for this very reason that I've sent one of my best to New Haven, Connecticut, so that he can be there as a resource for people in this circumstance and situation. So I suggest that you go to this man and speak to him, because in him you will find a force of nature, a person whose empathy is only matched with his brilliance, who's has so much to give and to share, that there's no doubt that that if you'll spend any time with him, with this man, you will be uplifted because of this man's uniquely spiritual soul. So go seek this man out if you are feeling in this state. Because and this is the advice I've given to anybody from your area that has asked this question. has expressed this concern. I have sent them to this rabbi, and I've received many much positive feedback. The name of the individual that you should seek out is Moshe Yitzchak Hecht. The Rebbe was telling him, "You're the man. You're the man. I sent you for a reason. No, see in you, in yourself, what I see in you, and you'll be okay." Mm-hmm. And the letter Moshe Yitzchak writes later in his memoirs that was the paradigm shift. That was the letter that changed his entire outlook on himself and gave him the power to become one of the most iconic Chabad rabbis, so much so that when he passed, the Rebbe never did this. But when he passed, the Rebbe divided an entire Farbrengen. It was almost a 3-hour eulogy on the Shabbos of his passing to the man who was Moshe Yitzchak Hecht. Point being, oftentimes we need the message of this parsha to help combat the machinations of our own Yetzer Hara that tells us, stay on the sidelines. You're not cut out for this. This is not your moment. It's be arrogant of you to assume that you can achieve this. Rather, stay in your lane, stay in your place, stay on the sidelines. And the parsha says, no, stand up and be counted. Hashem made you in a unique and special way, and take that message and run with it. Be the Moshe Yitzchak Hecht that Moshe Yitzchak Hecht needed. He wasn't being dishonest. Moshe Yitzchak Hecht needed help, and the Rebbe responded, "I don't discard that you need help, and you need a spiritual uplift. But you know who Moshe Yitzchak Hecht needs? He needs Moshe Yitzchak Hecht. So Moshe Yitzchak Hecht, be the Moshe Yitzchak Hecht that Moshe Yitzchak Hecht needs." And each one of us has to, in the moment, rise to the occasion. And you're going to make mistakes. And you're going to slide this way. You're going to slide that way. And ultimately, you're going to get to the doorstep of the land of Canaan. And that's the point. The journey is going to be fraught with perils. Perfection is not what's expected. But step onto the field. Yes, Sandy.
Well, since we're on numbers, and thank you for the story, but actually, in regards to numbers, we don't count people ourselves, if I recall correctly. So can you speak to that briefly? And then, unfortunately, I have to run myself over.
Yeah, well, as we all do. So the answer is yes, we count. When we count, logistically, this is more of a logistical point. We count not 1, not 2, not 3. Almost for the same reason, because the Yetzer Hara, in the fact that the Yetzer Hara, the Satan, is the opposition of all things holy and all things good, for the very reason we just said, is bothered by our numbers. And so, simply put, to not give the Yetzer Hara any undue attention to our numbers, we don't count directly. We don't say 1, 2, or 3. Rather, we count either through we count the half shekel coin that the Jewish people each one gave, or we count, as I just said, the easiest way that we do it is just the not 1, not 2, which is ultimately it's just a gimmick, as it were. So I'm not counting, I'm counting, right? I'm not saying 1, 2, 3. I'm saying not 1, not 2, not 3. The Yetzer Hara is thoroughly confused, and we got him. No, it's just simply a nod to this point. But if it's actually because of the value of each individual, that when you draw attention to the intrinsic value, and you literally say 1 and 2 and 3, the Yetzer Hara, the Satan, feel a need to do something about it, to try and reduce those numbers. So it actually ends up validating the point that we are making. the Yetzer Hara and the Satan, in opposition to all things good, all things positive, all things powerfully impactful in a good way, would feel a strong desire to reduce the items of value that you just articulated. I promise you, if you counted clods of dirt, the Satan wouldn't be would not be paying that much attention. So it speaks to the intrinsic value that every single person has. That when counting, we count so that we ourselves have the number, but we do it in a way that we are trying to foil the stratagems of those that stand in opposition to holiness. Does that answer the question?
I will think on it. Thank you. Unfortunately, I have to run. So thanks again for the class, and be well.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat
Again,
shalom,
this is
everyone.
a special Shabbos. The
Yeah.
U.S. government
Yes.
all Shabbases are special, but the U.S. government has recognized the month that we're in. I don't know. I guess they started the month of May. I'm not sure, but as Jewish American heritage, whatever. I don't know what it is, but a beautiful call, I would say. Whether you're a fan of the president or not, the idea that the president called that all Jews should participate in Shabbos, what a beautiful thing. Unfortunately, at a time when most of society and many leaders are targeting Jews and trying to make them feel less proud and less connected to their Judaism. Here you have a president who is encouraging Jews to embrace their Yiddishkeit and to celebrate and observe a Shabbos in commemoration of 250 years of America, saying that there is an intrinsic bond between Jews and Judaism and this wonderful country that we all call home. And so a letter went out from the president of the United States. And by the way, little secret, Bod had a lot to do with it. But the calling for Jews to embrace and celebrate Shabbos, this Shabbos, as part of 250 years of the United States and the Jewish history connected for all 250 years, in fact, preceding. But we'll hopefully see everybody in Shul. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom. See you.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you.